The US is the only industrialized, wealthy nation in the world that does not offer paid parental leave. Literally every other country does.
Wow, that's very harrowing. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Birth Lounge podcast. Okay, one of the things that is on all of our minds as we start to prep for baby is maternity leave, paternity leave, parental leave. How are we going to get paid when we have our baby? How much time do we have off of work? Is our job safe? Can we be fired because we're having a baby? Can we be fired while we're on maternity leave and leave to have our baby, thinking that we have a job, and then while we're away, we actually lose our job? These are questions on all of our minds, and I'm so excited today to have Linzay Davis on the show. Linzay is the founder of Hello Bundle, like welcoming your bundle of joy. And Hello Bundle helps new and expecting parents navigate parental leave in the US specifically so that you can take the most paid time off possible and take advantage of all of the programs that are available to you. However, one of the most confusing things is that what is available to you is literally so dependent on where you live, where you work, how long you've worked there, what kind of PTO you have accrued during that time. It's super unfortunate that our country doesn't have a better paid leave policy, but it just is what we have at the moment. So Linzay is going to dive into what are the options that we have in the US. What is FMLA and how does it impact parental leave? Plus, what most people get wrong about taking advantage of FMLA while they have a baby. Also, do you get parental leave if you're adopting a baby? And what about short-term disability? Is that something that you should know about and be familiar with? One thing I learned about short-term disability on this episode is that you have to have opted in to short-term disability, and not all employers actually offer short-term disability. And if you're anything like me, you're an entrepreneur, so you are an LLC, sole proprietor, you don't work for anybody else. Don't worry, Linzay's going to talk to us about sole proprietors and entrepreneurs and business owners. We're even going to talk about K1, which are partners in the company. And she's going to break down exactly how you apply for your state's paid parental leave compensation package. And then, of course, to get a little controversial, at the end, I'm going to be asking Linzay what are the best and worst states to have a baby, plus what are the best companies that have amazing parental leave policies so that maybe you want to apply there. Admittedly, this is a topic that I don't know too much about, but being pregnant with my first baby, I want to make sure that I am informed about parental leave and FMLA and exactly what my state offers when little Saggy baby arrives. So grab your pen and paper because I think this is a topic that you're probably going to want to take notes on. And without further ado, Linzay, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm really excited for this topic. And I was telling you before we started recording that I usually come to the table with a lot of knowledge about the topics, and I usually invite experts on that I feel like I can mentally spar with. I feel pretty equipped to come to the conversation. I have questions and I have some knowledge, but this is not one of those topics. This is a topic that, and I know I'm not alone in that. I know that a lot of us have questions about it, and I feel parental leave, maternity leave, paternity leave, we all have so many questions, and I think it can be really confusing because there are unanswered questions. We don't know where to get the answers. The legislation is changing. It depends on where you live. It depends on where you work. So before we dive into the nitty-gritty, can you explain to us the landscape of parental leave just in a general sense across the US?
Yeah, and I'd say your like lack of knowledge around parental leave definitely is not just you. It's everybody. And it was me before I became a parental leave consultant. It's like
Hmm.
the reasons why I started this business. But to give you just like a broad idea when we're thinking about parental leave, we're looking at two primarily different things. One is how you get paid when you take time off from work when you have a baby or welcome a child into your family in any capacity
Okay.
and you can't go to work. So, how are you going to get paid? And then the other side of the coin is how do you keep your job and keep your health insurance? So, essentially, how do you not get fired for taking this time off? And in the United States right now, we only have one side of that, and that's FMLA, which provides us with job protection. So that's the phrase that we use. It's job protection, is basically what we say for the concept of you're not going to get fired and you're going to keep your health insurance. And that's it. That's all we have in the United States at the federal level. And then where it gets even more confusing is it's different depending upon what state you live in, depending upon what city you live in, depending upon where you work. And there's so many factors that go into it, which is why, one of the reasons at least, why it's so confusing and people just don't understand how it works.
Do you think that is by design? Do you think that it's helpful for the system, the big system that obviously it's us versus the system? Do you think that's by design that it's so confusing?
I don't want to be
Come on, be
pessimistic
a
and be like,
pessimist.
yeah, I don't know. Yes. The short answer is yes. Like, I feel the government has made it purposely confusing because they want us to not have, they want us to have babies and then not go back to work. So that feels, if we can't access parental leave, we don't go back to work. And so there really is no parental leave. You just quit your job. But on the other hand, like, it is so confusing. And I don't know how to make it less confusing unless we just had an overarching umbrella policy like Canada does, where it's just if you have a job and you're taking time off, you can have 12 or 18 months, like, and we're going to pay you part of your income. And I think that would definitely make it a lot easier because it's
Yeah.
not like that now.
Do you think that's attainable? We watch other countries do it and it works well. And I'm well aware, we've talked about this on the show before, you guys, that the US is not like any other country. So to think that we could copy and paste legislation or policies or any sort of reform directly from one country to the US is almost it's just not a reality in pretty much anything. But do you think, Lindsay, that we could adopt something that other countries have done to give us this nationwide umbrella term of what parental leave looks like and what that could mean for families?
100%. There is no doubt in my mind that the US could adopt a policy that is easy to understand, is accessible to everybody that needs it, and just makes sense. And a lot of times, what we'll hear is we can't afford it or it's too expensive. But what people don't understand is the states that have adopted paid parental leave policies, it's not that like people are like just getting paid out of like taxes or like just this like random place that you're getting this money from. It's an insurance policy. You are paying into it your entire working life. And when you need to make a claim, like when you have a baby or you break your leg or your parent is ill or your child is sick and you need to take time off and get paid, then you make a claim and you get paid based on what you paid into the system.
Mm.
So it's money in, money out. It's insurance companies make money all the time, everywhere. And this is exactly what that is. Of course, we could make that work in the United States.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent that we could as well. And then what I personally would love, and you guys know this is not my forte, but I mean, I obviously think anything is possible, and I don't succumb to the idea that there's no money. There's so much money
Oh my
circulating
gosh, yeah.
in our country. There's so much money circulating in our country that anything is possible. But I would love to see a nationwide parental leave policy, and then each individual state could choose if they wanted to tack on to that and to give their citizens and their families even better treatment if they so chose to do that. Okay, when we first opened up, you said growing your family in any capacity. So, does FMLA and parental leave cover things like adoption?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So if I like to use the phrase like welcoming a child into your family in
Okay.
any capacity, you can qualify for FMLA. That's just one of the qualifiers, though. There's a few others that you would need to hit in order to qualify for it. But if you're adopting, fostering, having a baby, physically having a baby, you're a surrogate or a gestational carrier having a baby, or your partner is having a baby, or there's also FMLA for if you're taking over the care of a child temporarily in some circumstances. So, yeah, it covers all of those.
Wow, I had no idea. Okay, and what are the other criteria that you would need to meet?
Yes, so there are three. You need to have worked at your employer for the last 12 months. You need
Okay.
to have worked at least 1,250 hours in those 12 months. And you need to work at a location where there are at least 50 other employees within a 75-mile radius. And I hate all of the qualifiers, but that last one is really what gets me, especially with everyone working remote now. That needs to be updated. FMLA was written in 1993.
Wow.
And it was supposed to be like a stepping stone to get us to better policies. Nothing has changed since then. So, like, it's time for a change. It's time for it to get better. We need pay, but we also need more people to qualify for it. Right now, 46% of Americans qualify for it. So, if you are one of the 54% of Americans that don't qualify for it, that means you could get fired for taking one day off from work after having a baby.
So, when you have a baby, this idea that you can't get fired because you're on maternity leave is just a fallacy. It's not true.
What is maternity leave? That's the big question. Is FMLA maternity leave? Is it what your company gives you? Is it what your state gives you? We think it's all of those things combined and puzzle pieced together gives you what your parental leave or your maternity leave is. But there's not just like people will ask me all the time. They'll message me on TikTok or Instagram and be like, "What's my maternity leave?" And I'm like, "I have no idea." There's so many things that go into this. But people just think it's like this thing that we get, and there isn't.
Wow. That must be very US specific because I
Oh,
feel
yeah.
like in other countries, it is just a thing that you get.
Yeah. The US is the only industrialized, wealthy nation in the world that does not offer paid parental leave. Literally every other country does.
Wow, that's very harrowing. And then when you do get it, it is 6 weeks or 8 weeks or a very generous 16 weeks. And you
Yeah.
still have to leave your baby at 4 months old, and your body is just 4 months out from having a baby.
Yeah. It's not ideal. That's for sure.
Yeah, super less than ideal. Okay, so it sounds like there's a lot of convoluted kind of things that can go down when you're trying to figure out your maternity leave, parental leave, FMLA. So why don't we just walk through a general sense of what that would look like? So I find out I'm pregnant. Now what?
Yes. So I go back to that first thing that we talked about where there's two things that you need to have a successful parental leave. You need pay and you need job protection. So let's start off with pay because everybody loves to talk about how to get paid. There's four different ways that you can get paid during parental leave. Through your state, through your company, through short-term disability insurance, like a private short-term disability insurance like Aflac or Guardian that you pay into through your company, and then PTO, vacation, sick time. So you need to find out which one of or all four, two of them, which ones of those do you qualify for? About 25% of companies in the US offer paid parental leave. So only 1 in 4 out of you listening are probably going to get paid from your company. 9 states in Washington, D.C. right now currently have paid parental leave, but we're adding like 3 or 4 to the mix in 2026, which is really wonderful. So basically, if you live on the West Coast or the East Coast or Colorado, you're probably going to get some sort of paid parental leave through your state. But if you were to live anywhere else, nada. And then you have to find out, have I opted into short-term disability insurance through my employer? Sometimes your parental leave through your employer is short-term disability insurance. Like someone, like when you get hired, HR will be like, oh yeah, we have maternity leave. But then if you don't opt into the short-term disability insurance prior to getting pregnant, you don't qualify for it. So you have to opt in prior to getting pregnant. And not all employers offer it. So not everybody even is going to have the ability to even opt into it. And then we know PTO, vacation time. So like you have to figure out how to get paid. Those are the 4 programs. And then you have to figure out how to get your job protection. So there's a few different ways to get job protection. One that we've talked about is through FMLA. That's through the federal government. Many states offer job protection. It really lines up with the states that offer paid parental leave also. And then there are some like smaller municipalities, depending upon if you work for the state or the government or county, city, you might get job protection through those. And then there's the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, which is its whole other like can of beans that we could talk forever about, but it's a new-ish law that says that if you are affected by pregnancy or a recent pregnancy in any capacity and you need an accommodation at your workplace because of that limitation of the pregnancy or recent pregnancy, you can ask for a reasonable accommodation. And as long as it's not going to create an undue hardship at your workplace, your employer has to say yes. So, one accommodation that my clients ask for often is job protection. Please don't fire me. And there's a million other things that you could ask for, but that's one way that you could get job protection if you don't qualify for it any other way.
And what would be other things? Things that come to my mind are like, can I please stop lifting heavy boxes? Could I have 10 or 15-minute breaks throughout the day? Could I please maybe have a stool to sit on if I'm at a job that requires me to stand a lot of the time? What other things are reasonable for us to ask?
Yeah, those are all very reasonable accommodations. You could also ask for a closer parking spot. You could ask to work from home. You could ask to work in a different location. You could ask for different work duties. Like I've worked with people that work for, we have SDG&E in San Diego, but like the gas and electric company, and they're like out in the field and they don't have access to a restroom. And I'm pregnant. Like I have to go pee all the time. I'm like,
All the time.
I think you might need to ask for an accommodation to like work in the office for the next whatever while you need to be, because you can't stop your job every hour to go find a bathroom. Like that doesn't seem like it would be beneficial to the company. So hopefully they would find something else that you could be doing instead so you can keep your job and continue to get paid.
The fierce advocate in me is duh. You should ask for these things, like obviously.
Yeah, I know.
But younger HeHe at one time was still a fierce advocate, and I advocated my way straight into being fired.
Oh,
And I didn't know that being fired was a possibility. I never once thought that if I stood up for this at my place of work, if I spoke up about this injustice that I was seeing, that I could possibly be fired. It literally never once crossed my mind. I thought, of course, they're going to hear me. And of course, they wouldn't want this to happen at their place of work. And of course, the management is going to want to fix this. And they did fix it by escorting me out. And they said,
oh my
you're
gosh.
gone. Bye bye. We don't like the way that you are bringing light and attention to problems that we don't want to have to fix otherwise. And I was fired. So, on a really realist type of conversation, Are you at some sort of risk for being fired, or does it put a spotlight on your back by asking for these accommodations? Only because I just want people to know up front if there's any sort of risk to these conversations. I would not have done anything differently personally. But I know that's not the case for a lot of people. And I also am very blessed that I was in a place and I had a partner that our lifestyle could take that hit where I was able to get fired and it didn't destroy our family or destroy us financially. I also know that is not everyone's story. So, what kind of risk are present if we are asking for these accommodations, if any?
That's a really good question. And I wish I had a straight answer. The law does say that you cannot be discriminated against for asking for an accommodation or for asking for FMLA. But that doesn't mean that they won't. Even if the speed limit's 25, that doesn't mean people are not going to go 35. And it's the same thing in your workplace. And if that were to happen, where you were discriminated against or fired for asking for leave or announcing a pregnancy or something of that nature, your next step would either be to walk away or to seek legal counsel. And there's not really anything between that. And it really depends upon like where you are in your life and like your stress levels. And I like the fierce advocate in me is always get an attorney, talk to the attorney, figure out what you can do. This is not right. But like the women that I'm working with are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months pregnant. They're like vulnerable, hormonal, like emotional people. And like, I don't fault them at all if they're like, I just can't deal with this right now. I need to focus on me and staying healthy and stress free for my baby. And that is one of the reasons why it continues to be the way that it is. It's just set up for us to fail.
Yeah. We interviewed in episode, I think it's 269, employment rights attorney Ryan Steigar, and we
Mm.
talked about your legal rights in pregnancy and with parental leave. So, you guys, if you feel like you've been discriminated against, or you are worried about being discriminated against, or you feel like you were wrongfully terminated, check out that episode. He's got some really great resources and some really great information and just education for you to take advantage of because like what you said, Lindsay, the law says that shouldn't happen, but I think the reality is that we probably all know somebody that lost their job during maternity leave, or we all know somebody that was a great employee, had nothing on their record, and then they became pregnant, and all of a sudden they were constantly being called in and reprimanded. All of a sudden they couldn't be 2 minutes late from lunch. All of a sudden they had all of this work being put on their plate, and it really does feel like discrimination.
That's still technically legal. If you are not getting fired specifically because of your pregnancy or taking time off to recover from childbirth, then it's fair game. And if your company is doing mass layoffs or if they're just eliminating your position, the mass layoffs, that would be a hard fight to fight. But if you're getting laid off because they're eliminating your position and you're the only position getting eliminated and that you're on parental leave, that would be a little fishy. And I would definitely suggest talking to an employment attorney at that point. But legally, it's legal.
Wow, that's so unfortunate, but also not surprising, especially in a country that we're the only one that doesn't actually offer maternity or parental leave like appropriately or across the board. It's something that we have to fight for, and or you have to like get lucky. You have to live in the right state. You have to work for the right employer. You have to like
Mhm.
work long enough. Like
Mhm.
it's really almost like making you earn your keep a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. And that's why the best time to plan your parental leave is before you even get pregnant, so that none of this is surprising to you and you can make a plan so that you get what you need and what you want when you have your baby instead of being forced up against a wall. And I feel like it's all, like we've been this like doom and gloom and it's like terrible for women in the United States, but there are so many programs available to us. And for the most people, for the majority of new parents going into this, you're not going to face these horrible battles where you feel like you need to sue your employer or advocate for yourself. There are so many employers out there that will just say, take all the time you need, and here are some resources. And they're and if you get laid off, there's several states that offer state-sponsored paid parental leave that you still qualify for pay. And now there's a silver lining of you don't have to worry about when you're going back to work because you can get paid for as long as you are disabled, which in California could be up to a year. In New York, New Jersey could be 6 months. And you can, on your own terms, find another job and go back the way that you want to instead of feeling like November 14th is coming up and that's the day I have to go back to work and I'm not ready. There's silver linings out there.
Yeah. So I feel like we've done a lot of talking about maternity leave for the gestational parent, so the person who's actually carrying the baby. What about partners? What about parental leave for non-gestational parents who are not going to be given birth themselves?
Yeah, so we follow the same formula,
Okay.
job protection and pay, except for now, short-term disability insurance is not going to be an option for you because you're not disabled by your pregnancy or your delivery. So now you're only looking at pay through your employer, your state, or PTO. And then job protection is the same because in almost all cases, job protection covers the birthing parent and the non-birthing parent. There's a few, actually, I can only think of one. In California, we have a job protection program that's only for the birthing parent. But in most cases, you're going to get a lot of the same pay and job protection as the birthing parent.
That's good to know. And then in terms of pay, I feel like there's a lot of talk out there about like why I got 60% pay, I got this amount of pay. Is 60% pretty common and traditional? Is that the law? Is that what we can bank on, or does that also change depending on state and employer?
So the when someone says, "Oh, I'm getting paid 60%," that probably means that they're using short-term disability to get paid when they have their baby.
Got it.
Because most of the time, short-term disability is going to pay you 60%. I see 80%, I see 100%, but
Wow.
most of the time it's 60%, and you generally 6 weeks postpartum for a vaginal delivery or 8 weeks postpartum for a C-section. But what people don't know is that if you have any complications that disable you prior to delivery or after those 6 or 8 weeks postpartum, you can talk to your doctor. And if you and your doctor decide that you are disabled, you can extend your disability and get paid for longer.
Wow. Okay, you just need a doctor's note?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That is super helpful to know. So, in terms of finding out what your parental leave at your company is, who are we going to for that? HR?
Yeah, except for a lot of companies don't even have HR. Like when I had my daughter, I worked for a company that had 5 people, and my boss was HR, and she also lived in Oregon. And so she was not familiar with California's benefits. And so I didn't really have anybody to go to other than Google. And so I Googled and I got myself down the wrong path. I ended up missing out on at least 12 weeks of paid leave that I just did not know about because I didn't know about it. And that's like my biggest mission is to help everybody that's going through this transition to understand what benefits they qualify for so that they can decide whether or not they want to take them and use them to their fullest potential because it's so heartbreaking when people just don't understand what they qualify for or how to qualify for it and how to apply and all of there's just so many nuances that go into it. And so that's like my mission with my business. But if you do have HR at your company, HR is a great place to start. However, by asking your HR for their parental leave policy, you're essentially telling them you're pregnant and you're outing yourself. And there's a whole another layer of company culture that goes into whether or not you're ready to tell HR, or do you want to go to your boss first, or do you want to go to a trusted colleague first to tell them before you go out and tell everybody else, because that's when things can start to break down and you want to have control of the situation. You don't want it to be like I talked to a woman recently who she asked HR for their parental leave policy, and the next day one of her coworkers came to her and was like, "You're pregnant?" Yeah. So not only did HR assume that she was pregnant because of the request, they went and told somebody else who then went and came back and told her. So it wasn't under wraps at all. So like you don't want that situation to happen, but sometimes in order to get the policy, you have to ask for it because it's not always easily accessible.
Another way that you could do that, though, is to ask well in advance. So the very first time that you start to think, oh, I may want to have a kid at the end of the year or next year, or I know that in the next 3 years we're going to be having a baby, ask then, understanding that policy could change at any time and that there may be a little bit of tweaks that happen to the policy or even legislation in your state. But if you want your medical information to be protected, you could go ahead and ask now. And then, if someone comes to you and says you're pregnant, you can say
No.
no. And second of all, that's a very rude thing to say. And third
Yeah.
of all, who told you that? Because that was incredibly inappropriate. It almost feels like a HIPAA violation.
Oh, it's like it has to be. I can't imagine that it wouldn't be. And to your point about asking prior to even needing it, the best time is to ask before you accept the job. So you get
Oh,
the
good
offer,
idea.
you negotiate the terms of your offer, and then you ask, what's your parental leave policy? And you will learn so much about if you want to work for that company, about how they respond to that. Nothing to even do with the policy, just how they respond. Because a lot of companies that offer paid parental leave require you to be at the company for a set amount of time. Oftentimes it's 12 months. So let's say you get the job and you get pregnant the next day. Like you're not going to hit those 12 months. So it would be better if you had negotiated to get the parental leave upon hire instead of not getting it because you didn't know that you were pregnant right away and you're not going to qualify for it.
So that's something that you can negotiate in your hiring process is I'd like it to be waived that I don't have to be at the company for 12 months before my maternity leave kicks in. I'm not currently pregnant, but should I become pregnant in the next year, I don't want to have to wait and I'd like to be awarded the maternity leave.
Yep. And you should
Wow.
definitely do it if you're already pregnant. If you're not going to hit the 10-year requirement because you're already pregnant, asking them, or you might like the order of operations might be different, but it's always get the offer, negotiate the offer, and then say, I have great news. I am pregnant and I'm so excited to start this job and get things taken care of so that I can get everything rolling, get coverage ready so that I can take the time off that I need and come back an even better employee because now I've got another mouth to feed, or however you want to say it. But you'll also learn a lot from that conversation on whether or not you want to work for them or not.
Yeah, and just how they react, their
Yeah.
facials and their
Mm.
body language and the language that they use about maternity leave.
Yep. Yeah. It shows
Wow.
a lot.
Yeah, I imagine so. Okay, I have a couple of very specific questions. So, like you in your job when you had your baby, what happens if you work in a place that has or is headquartered in a state that you don't live in? And now we're looking at two different states. What state actually dictates your leave, and do you get to take advantage from both states?
So, no, you don't get both. And in almost all circumstances, it's going to be the state where you are physically working. So, I have a lot of clients that live in New Jersey but work in New York, or live in New York but work in New Jersey. And it depends upon where you are physically working and if HR has you registered as an employee in the correct state. So you also want to make sure that you're registered in the correct state and that you are paying into, because I mentioned before how it's an insurance policy. You want to make sure that you're paying into the right state's parental leave policy. I talked to, I like never do this, but I was at the gym a few months ago and the woman next to me was pregnant, but I wasn't going to say anything. But then she was chatting with her friend about being pregnant. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I definitely was eavesdropping, but if you need any help with your parental leave, I'm more than happy to help you. And so she messaged me on Instagram and she found out that she was not registered in the state of California and she was not paying into California state disability insurance, which would automatically make it so she would not qualify. She would be completely disqualified. So she had enough time to figure this out, go to her employer, make her employer fix it so that she could take California state disability insurance and paid family leave when she had her baby, instead of going to apply and then getting denied and being like, what the heck? Why am I getting denied? And having all of that stress when you have a newborn.
And also not getting paid and not having job protection and just what a freaking headache. That's
Yeah.
insane. How often do you think that it happens, slash, how often do you see that it happens that there's discrepancies and mistakes on the HR's part where you are not registered in the right place?
It's not very often. It usually has to do with when you move and you tell your employer that you're moving, you give them a new address, but maybe your employer doesn't register you with that state properly. I'm telling you, it as a business owner, it is one of the worst parts of being a business owner is
Yep.
registering employees in different states.
Yep.
And I could just see how an HR person would just be like, I'm going to sweep this under the rug and nobody's going to notice. But when they go to apply for unemployment or disability insurance, they will notice. And yeah, that'd be bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be a problem. Okay, now I'm thinking in terms of people like you and I, of entrepreneurs, and particularly at my company, I don't have 50 employees. I don't have 50 employees at all, but much less in that 75-mile radius. So, how are entrepreneurs getting paid for maternity leave? And what about our employees, or if you're an independent contractor for a smaller company?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's so many layers in it, but the first one I want to address is that having 50 employees doesn't have anything to do with pay. That's
Oh,
just job protection. So I hear
okay.
all the time, I'm not going to get paid because I work for a small company. And that's just not the case. Pay through your generally through your state is like what we're talking about here. It has nothing to do with how many employees your company has. The job protection is where you need 50 employees. So for you as a business owner, you could just choose not to fire your employees when they go on leave. And now
And
all
I
of a
don't,
sudden,
just for everyone listening, I don't. Your job is safe.
and then pay is completely different. So you need to be paying into your state's paid parental leave policy because we talked about earlier how it's an insurance policy. You have to be paying in to be able to make a claim and get paid. And that usually is only going to happen when you are a W-2 employee that's paying taxes and has deductions taken out of them. So if you work for the state or the government or anything from that capacity, it's going to look very different. But if you are a regular W-2 employee working for a company and you have deductions on your pay stub, look for your state's paid parental leave deduction. Like California's CASD, CASDI, Massachusetts is PFMLA, I think. New York, NYPFL, New Jersey, NJFLI. Look for those. If it's there, you qualify. But if you are self-employed, an LLC, sole prop, you're not paying into those programs because you're getting paid through a 1099 or owner's draws, or you're just paying yourself, and taxes are being taken out later and you never get that deduction taken out. So then you don't qualify. So there are two options for you. Many states that offer sponsored paid leave have an opt-in program that you can opt into and you start paying into it and then you then qualify. Pay in for a certain amount of time before time, after the fact, and figure out like how much you're going to get paid. A lot of time it's based on profits, and as a self-employed person, you're always trying to keep your profits as low as possible. The other option is to create an S corp for your organization and then start paying yourself as a W-2 employee, because then you're paying into the state's paid parental leave program. To a tax accountant, talk to someone that knows your business and knows if that's financially worth it and viable for you. But there's other three options: getting paid through your company that like you'd be paying yourself, getting paid through short-term disability insurance. If you're a small company, you probably can't afford short-term disability insurance and you don't have it. And then PT, your only option is to get paid through your state.
Yeah. So what about someone who is a partner or like a K-1 employee because they're not W-2 and they're not entrepreneurs? How does that play into it?
So if you're paying into your state's paid parental leave policy, you're gonna qualify. So
Okay.
you just have to work with your tax accountant to figure out how you can pay yourself so that you're paying into the policy. And then also keep in mind, like, you do have to pay in for a certain amount of time before you can qualify. And it's different depending upon what state that you live in. And you're not going to like many states have a disability policy and a bonding paid family leave policy. If you're a non-birthing parent, you're not going to qualify for the disability or medical portion of it. You will only qualify for the bonding or paid family leave. But it still could give you 8 or 12 weeks of partially paid leave, depending upon what state you live in.
Okay, so let me ask a clarifying question just for my own knowledge, and listeners out there might have the same question. Let's say I've worked in Massachusetts for 10 years. So I've been paying in for 10 years to the state program. And let's say you are lucky enough to live in a state that has a state program. But I've recently changed jobs and I'm not going to hit the 12-week or 12-month mark, and I didn't know to negotiate it. So that one is off the table. So in that case, I will get paid family leave from the state, but I won't be able to take advantage of my company's policy. Is that how that works?
It depends.
Oh,
So it depends upon what state you live in.
okay.
Most states, it doesn't matter how long you've been at your company and you'll qualify for the paid leave. New York comes to mind. You have to have worked for your company for 26 weeks in order to qualify for paid leave in New York. Yeah.
Yikes.
But the job protection basically goes away. We do have a program in California for the birthing parent that you could have started your job yesterday and you'd qualify today. But that's the only one. All the other job protection programs that I can think of off the top of my head require you to have been there for a year. But to the point or your question about your company's policy, it varies. Like every company policy varies. So we don't know. When someone comes to me and they're like, "What's my company's policy?" I'm like, "We're going to have to look at your documentation together because we don't know if there's a 10-year requirement. We don't know how much they're going to pay you. We don't know how many weeks they're going to pay you for. We don't know if you qualify." And we have to figure out all of that.
Okay, so I think a really important question is how do we look up and apply for our state's parental leave? Is there an overall website? Are you going to your state's website? Is this through our employer?
So there isn't really like an official place that you can go to find out if your state offers state-sponsored leave. A Google search is one way to do it. We also offer that on our website. So we have several blog posts. I have tagged at the top of my TikTok and my Instagram what states offer paid parental leave and what they offer. And so that's what I would suggest doing. We're on top of that every day. We know what's going on in every state in terms of parental leave and what state offers what. So I think you should come to our website. But your next best bet is a Google search.
Okay. What are the best and the worst states for parental leave?
Oh my gosh. The best? I think the best is California. We offer the longest amount of time off and the most amount of pay. New Jersey, Massachusetts, Washington State, Oregon, Colorado, they also all have really great policies. The worst policy for a state-sponsored parental leave policy out there is like 12 weeks of pay capped at $900. I think that maybe Connecticut is capped at 981 a week, but they still offer 12 weeks, potentially 14 for birthing parents. So there's not really like a huge discrepancy between the states that offer paid parental leave. It's just like either they do or they don't.
And are there any states out there that don't offer anything at all?
All states have to go through FMLA. So every state can qualify for FMLA because it's a federal law. But like we mentioned, not everybody's going to qualify for it. But and other than that, some states have like just disability insurance. So that would cover pregnancy and a delivery if you're disabled by that, but not necessarily paid family leave, which covers both parents and bonding.
Interesting. Okay, and I won't ask you about the worst because I don't want to smear anybody, but what are some of the best companies that you can think of that have really amazing parental leave?
There's a lot out there that offer really great parental leave policies. Usually, larger companies are going to offer more pay and more time off. Like Meta, I know offers a really great parental leave policy. I know Apple does, Salesforce, but like those are the big giants that we know have a lot of money and can afford that. There are some smaller companies that offer paid parental leave. The Skim has a really wonderful resource. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, they did a campaign around Show Us Your Leave, around trying to get more attention around paid parental leave. And they have an Excel spreadsheet that has hundreds of companies listed and what each company offers that was filled in by us, by women and parents that were willing to share what their company offers. So that's a great resource. We have that linked at our website also.
Cool. And we'll link that in the show notes, you guys. I love nothing more than when women get together and band together to show the deficiencies that we're facing, but also to highlight the companies that are doing it really well and are treating us really well. One that I have always been a big fan of is Patagonia. They really care about their employees, they
Yes.
care about their families, and they care that you are taken care of. And I've never worked for Patagonia. I don't know anybody who has. I just know this from having clients that have worked for Patagonia, and I'm a lifelong supporter of Patagonia just because they truly do care about the people that work for them. And for me, that is one of the most important things as an employer is to care about the people who make your business what it is every day. Okay, Lindsay, my last question is a hypothetical question. If you had a magic wand and you could make an ideal nationwide policy in our country for parental leave for both gestational and non-gestational parents, what would that look like for you if the President of the United States came to you and said, make the policy, there's no cap, there's no rules, do what you want. How do we fix this nation? What would you do?
That would be amazing. I'd say, hell yeah, I'm in.
Sign me up
And I would give everybody at least 6 months of paid leave.
at 100%
Oh, yeah, for sure.
for both parents.
Oh, yes. Definitely, definitely for both parents. And that's one reason why I call it parental leave because we need non-birthing parents and dads taking parental leave just as much as we need moms and birthing parents taking parental leave. If we want to have equity in the workplace at any point in time, especially gender equity, we need both parents taking leave.
Yeah, and if we're really going to pour into our women and our children, like I think so many of us want to do, it can't be done by us being at home by ourselves. Our partners have to be at home with us, taking care of us. They need to be part of that process. And your baby and your partner, they deserve that bonding just as much as you and your baby do. Oh my goodness, Lindsay, this has been so much fun having you on. I came into this topic with a ton of questions. I'm leaving feeling really educated and informed and empowered. And I feel like I have a lot of action steps that I need to do for myself to look into maternity leave for myself as an entrepreneur and a business owner. And this conversation has actually made me realize I do a lot of things right within Tranquility by HeHe, but I also have places that I could grow to make our company even better for the people who serve our company and serve our clients. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
If people wanted to connect with you and learn from you or take advantage of your services, if they were interested in working with you, where can people do that?
Yeah, so come to our website, hello-bundle.com. So my company is called Hello Bundle. Like we are saying hello to your bundle of joy. Hello-bundle.com is our website. I also post on Instagram and TikTok almost every day. I don't keep any information. I try to give away as much free information as I possibly can. So follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you'd like one-on-one private consulting to help you figure out your parental leave and maximize the time off and pay that you can get, I have consultants all over the country that specialize in every state. So you can book that at our website.
I love that. And of course, you guys, everything will be linked below. And I will leave you with these questions. Are you prepared for your maternity leave? Do you know what parental leave in your state looks like? Have you ever looked into this? If you haven't, you guys take the information in this episode and get to work. I want you, as well as Lindsay, to take advantage of every single dollar and every single day that you can to be with your new family, to soak up that time with your bundle of joy, to bond just you and your partner and your new baby. Oh my gosh, this was such a good episode. I love, love, love the episodes where I don't really know that much coming into the conversation. And when I leave, I just feel like I have a powerhouse of knowledge now in my pocket. So, Lindsay, thank you for being here. I'll see everybody else in the next episode. Be sure to follow Hello Bundle on social media. And you can find me at Tranquility by HeHe and at the.birth.lounge. Until next time, head to your app store and download the Birth Lounge app for evidence-based childbirth education and data-driven postpartum support delivered straight to your phone. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I love hanging out with you, and it is an honor to be your go-to gal when it comes to preparing for your baby. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please leave a 5-star review and tell others why they should be listening to the Birth Lounge podcast too. You deserve to have a birth that you love with a provider that values your autonomy and respects informed consent without all the trauma that you so commonly hear about on social media. New episodes air every Wednesday and Friday. Hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. I'm HeHe, and this is the Birth Lounge Podcast.